The Boocast synth of the month is the Korg Odyssey. Hello again. Here's a question for you. Do you prefer Herbie Hancock or Add N to X? You like both, you say? Well, you're in luck. Here's the Odyssey. Since its release by ARP in 1972, the Odyssey found its way into the music and, more importantly, the live rigs of such diverse acts as Elton John, Jethro Tull, Nine Inch Nails, ABBA, Chick Corea, Devo, Gary Newman and Kraftwerk, to name but a few. Now, I always wanted one, and with the prices of original units skyrocketing, I was overjoyed when in 2014 Korg announced that they would be reissuing the Odyssey, albeit in a slightly shrunken format. And we're going to take a look at it right now. And if anyone asks you, is the Odyssey a funk synth or a punk synth, you can tell them it's both. Finally, the Korg Arp Odyssey, and this is the whiteface module version, and the reason it's a whiteface module version is because, well, yeah, you know the story, maybe you don't. I saw one of these and played one in the early 2000s in a shop on Charing Cross Road in London, and I fell in love with it, and it was ridiculously cheap, and I didn't have the money to buy it. So when this came out and I had the money to buy it, it had to be the whiteface, not only because of that, but also because this is the one that Florian Schneider played in Kraftwerk. And yeah, it's emotional. Ooh, it's dirty as well. So it's almost the ARP answer to the Mini Moog, in the sense that this is a non-patchable synthesizer. It's completely wired up internally, exactly like the Mini Moog is. And as the Mini Moog was a more portable version of the Moog modular systems, this is a more portable version of the ARP 2600 and an even more portable version of the ARP 2500. And as you'll see, it contained many of the great features of the 2600, just in a much more stripped down, more manageable, portable form. So what have we got here? Let's have a look. It's actually laid out quite differently to the Mini Moog, and there's quite an emphasis on modulation, which we'll come to, which is very ARP. Let's have a look. First of all, we've got two oscillators. I'll just bring up oscillator 1. I'm playing this from the Arturia key step, so let's just bring up the volume, bring up the filter. So the oscillators have a freely tunable range from very high to quite low. Oscillator 1 can also be turned into low frequency mode. We can hear that. Very, very helpfully, there's a fine tune control. Before I move on to oscillator 2, the other sound source is the noise generator, which goes from white to pink. Just turn that on. White, pink. Next we have oscillator 2. I'm going to run along the top here first and then come back along the bottom. I think that might make more sense. So oscillator 2, similarly, just tune that up, has similarly wide tuning with a subtle control. And you can blend them here in the mixer down here. So they're very, very easy to tune. And the synthesizer is Duophonic. Which is something that came from the ARP 2600 and has been carried over here, and it's as default. You had to do a little bit of patching on the ARP 2600 to get it to be Duophonic, but it's completely standard on the Odyssey. So, just realised I've got the high pass on. Let's turn that off. That's better. So yeah, you can tune these with each other and get chords, But we've also got sync on oscillator 2, which syncs oscillator 2 to oscillator 1. You can get that nice syncy sound thing. In fact, just quickly go down to the bottom shelf. We can use the ADSR to modulate the pitch of oscillator 2, which is great when you've got sync on. I'll just play it on its own. So now the ADSR envelope is modulating the pitch. But I put sync on. Get that lovely, teary, get those nice teary sounds. So we've got sync. Let's move along. We've also got one LFO, which can be tied to, I can see working along the top and then working along the bottom isn't actually going to work here. So let's abandon that idea. Okay, so the LFO is one single LFO and it outputs a sine and a square simultaneously. You can put the sine into oscillator 1. Let's take it out of sync. We can also do the same with oscillator 1. Modulate 1 on its own, modulate them both. Furthermore, there's in the proportional pitch control, which we'll come to in a second, this is a weird touch-sensitive bender. In the middle, there's a modulation, which applies the sine wave from the LFO to both the oscillators simultaneously. But you can do one on its own, giving that extra fatness. But you can also tune oscillator 1 to the square wave. There you go, I'll turn the drive off. So you can have one oscillator being modulated and the other one not, which is nice. This is where it starts to diverge from the idea of the Minimoog, because, I mean, you can't do that on the Minimoog, just modulate one oscillator and leave the other one straight. The Minimoog, you've got the mod wheel, and you've got a switch for pitch and a switch for filter. That's it. All of these switches along the bottom of the Odyssey are most of these switches along the bottom and most of these sliders along the bottom are something to do with modulation. So that gives you an idea of how different this is from the Minimoog. And it does have a certain quality. I mean, when we come to the filter, we'll definitely hear something there. There we go. So we can modulate with the LFO. Coming along these switches here, so this is the LFO modulation switch for oscillator 1. Goes from sine wave to square. The LFO modulation switch for oscillator 2 goes from LFO to SH mixer or pedal. So this brings us to although there's only one LFO, well, two if you count oscillator 1 when you can switch it to LFO mode. Beneath this LFO, we have this section here, which is the SH mixer and sample and hold sections. Just like in the 2600, you don't just have to have sample and hold giving you that random computer noise, which you can, so let's do that. Bring this up to here, push this switch up to sample and hold. So there's two modulation inputs here. And bring up the noise. So as you see, that is sampling noise. You can basically tell it how much to do it. You can come right down low, have it like a sort of confused wasp. Or right up here, have your broken computer fun. Let's go to square wave. LFO only goes up to 20 Hertz, down to 0.2 Hertz. So what the sample and hold mixer is, it's inputting into the sample and hold circuit. So you can choose what to put into it. You've got a choice anyway. So we choose noise here. You get random. But if you choose the saw wave of VCO1, you can hear that's got a slight pattern to it. So what it's doing is it's sampling the saw wave at different, according to the clock of the LFO. And it's because it's a regular pattern coming out, you're getting a kind of regular sequence coming out of this random circuit. If you change the frequency of oscillator 1, you get different effects. So that's a kind of random sound, but you can hear it's obeying a law. There, let me change the speed of the LFO. You can hear as the frequency of the LFO is interacting with the frequency of the sawtooth here. And you'll get different patterns according to how fast it's going. There we go. So that's quite nice. And obviously we can click that into sync. And we've got quite a lovely sort of effect there. Nice. So we've used the saw wave, but what happens if you use the square wave? Well, the saw wave is doing this, so you were getting samples at different values here, but a square wave is doing that. So we'll only get, in theory, we'll just get one value or another value. So interesting. Another thing we can do with this whole SH Mixer Sample Hold LFO section here is we can set it to keyboard trigger. Now, while it's in LFO trigger, the LFO speed is telling it when to do its thing. But when we go to keyboard trigger, it's just on key presses, it moves it on and takes a sample. In fact, if I just put an arpeggio in, which is just one note, I'm just playing one note on the keyboard here. If I bring this down. So with the sample and hold mixer set to only take the square wave from VCO1, we get this sort of rhythmic thing. And I'll bring up VCO2 into the SH mixer. It's almost a sequence. So I just realized I was sounding a bit gritty because I had the SH mixer or pedal going into the filter. So let's turn that off. We can also trigger the envelopes from the LFO. Add a bit of noise. There we go. A kind of bongo solo. We can mix the saw from VCO1 and the square from VCO2 and just muck around with this. So we're just messing with pitch at the moment, but we can also control the filter with this section. So let's move on to the filter. So the original Whiteface Odyssey had a 12 dB filter, and the Golden Brown Odyssey had the 24 dB Moog copyright infringing filter, and the final Mark III, that's the black and orange ones, had the 4075 filter, which is another 24 dB filter. Now Korg have let us have all three of these filter types here, and also a couple of extra things which you don't get on the original. But the first filter type is the 12 dB. And also, unusually for a 12 dB filter, it has an ability to self-oscillate, so we can hear that on its own. Keyboard CV is controlled from here, bringing up full. So yeah, you can perfectly play the filter through the keyboard. And then the next one, let's hear the Moog one. If I want to put something through it. So with the Moog one, yeah, there's a bit of a drop in the low frequencies. Very nice. And with the final version, so you can hear they have, even just at this setting with just one sawtooth, you can hear they have quite different qualities. But that's great, so filter switching is a real bonus with this for sound design, because you can hear the difference just with this one setting. We've also got a high pass filter, which feels like a 6 dB. I may be wrong. I'm going to go back to the 12 dB filter, which actually is my favourite, funnily enough. I'm not sure if it's because I had an early experience of it with my Charing Cross Road tragedy, but it's kind of my favourite. We've also got a drive switch, which just pushes a bit of extra girth through the filter. And if you listen to that, juiciness to it. Let's put another oscillator in there. That's jolly nice. Below the filter, we've got the audio mixer, and this is, confusingly, this is where you select the oscillator shapes for the oscillator 1 and oscillator 2 waveforms. So the switches are at the bottom, saw and square. That's all you get. We've also got ring mod. So that ring modulates oscillator 2 with oscillator 1. I'll just bring them both down. That's on noise. Let's put it down to ring mod. And that's a really lovely biting sound. And when used polyphonically, you get all that lovely. So when you play the keyboard polyphonically, your right hand, so you can only play 2 notes at a time. And when you're playing 2 notes at a time, your right hand controls oscillator 2 and your left hand controls oscillator 1. So because oscillator 1 is modulating oscillator 2, if I hold one note high up and just move the left hand around, you get different modulation frequencies going into the ring mod, and obviously you can bring them all up together. Let's bring this down a bit. I'm going to adjust the amount of ADSR going into the filter. So we can control the cutoff frequency with the ADSR via this switch here. I love that sound, and we bring in the portamento. Incidentally, the portamento slider, which is here, has a little mode switch. It switches between 2 different portamentos, which were associated with 2 of the different revisions of the Odyssey. I haven't actually tried that. There we go. Oh, yeah, and we got 2 octave up and 2 octave down, which is a nice touch because instead of just going 1 up and 1 down, we go all the way. So here we are in the mixer. So got the ring mod, we got noise, we got oscillator 1 and oscillator 2 relative levels, and then we've got modulation into the filter, so we can take the keyboard CV, set the keyboard CV up full, so the filter opens up and down the keyboard. If I bring that like that, which is quite a common thing. Basically, as notes get higher on real instruments, they tend to get a little bit brighter, so that's what that's doing. The mistake I made earlier is I had this switched to SH mixer or pedal. So this takes the input from here, the SH mixer. So whatever's going into here will modulate the filter when this is in the down position. So now the filter's been modulated by oscillator 1. Now if I put oscillator 1 into low frequency mode, quite nice, isn't it? So oscillator 1 is currently a sawtooth if I make it a square, and if I change the pulse width, you get sort of swinging effect. Something I forgot to mention, we've also got pulse width modulations. So we're using oscillator 1 as an LFO, so that's modulating the filter. We can now use the LFO to modulate the pulse width of oscillator 2. In fact, we can use it to modulate the pulse width of oscillator 1, which is currently an LFO. So that's keyboard control voltage or straight out of this SH mixer into there. Moving on, we can modulate the filter with the LFO. So let's bring that up. we can only use the sine wave here, but then we can also switch it up to sample and hold. And as we did before, I'm going to put noise into the sample and hold so you can hear that, with the LFO triggering it. Take the noise out. So VCO2 now set to square wave, going into the sample and hold mixer. We can actually set VCO2 to a saw, even though we're still outputting the square here as well. I'm going to set the ADSR envelope generator to LFO repeat and the AR envelope to repeat. Gives you that nice sequenced thing going on. One thing I will say about the Korg Arp Odyssey is it seems to me that the LFO re-triggers on every key press, and I haven't yet found a way of stopping it from doing that. If you can hear that, it doesn't keep going, although you can just set it to auto-repeat. So yeah, we can put the sample and hold straight into the filter. So then we can choose the amount of modulation coming from the envelopes. So we've got two envelopes. We've got an attack release envelope and an attack decay sustained release envelope. And this switch can choose which is going to modulate the filter. So I'm going to go to AR. So we're actually using the two-stage envelope, which is sometimes useful, and we can also use the ADSR, which is perhaps a little bit more useful. Following the flowchart through, we then go through the high-pass filter, which just cuts out the low frequencies if you want them to go, and then into the amplifier, the VCA. Now the VCA, again, you can choose which of the envelopes is going to trigger the VCA. So we've used AR here, but we can use ADSR, which has a slightly, obviously there are more stages to this, which means you can shape the sound a little bit better. On an old Roland synth like the SH1, for example, I mean, we have two envelopes there as well. And what I would generally do is, for nice chunky filter sounds, I would set the VCA to go through the AR envelope. So it's just on. No messing around, and set the filter to go through the ADSR, because that gives you lovely, watch your ears, it gives you lovely bass kicks and zap sounds. Put the keyboard CV up. Listening to that filter and the resonance, I've had the drive on all this time as well, I'll turn it off. But that filter response with just getting that kicked zap, it sounds more biting and it goes lower than the mini mode one does, at least on my mini mode, because if you listen to that, it goes all the way down. You feel that rumbling. Now on my it's a reissue mini mode. It only goes down to about there, and then it fades away. So I'd say this is a better filter response, especially for those kind of kick sort of things. Let's put that. Obviously, I'll leave it up there. Put a bit of noise in. Nice drum sound there. It's visually very different to the mini Moog, and we've got sliders instead of knobs. And I think that probably makes it easier to use in a live situation, because you can see where everything's set just at a glance. You can sort of guess what kind of sound you're going to get if you're in a rush. Although, of course, we don't have any of those nice Moog switches between feet of oscillators. You've got to kind of find it. But then we got a little fine tune, which I think mitigates that a little bit. So I don't know, is it easier or is it more difficult? I don't know. But the thing is that it looks different. It's set up differently. I mean, you select the waveform in the mixer and you come back and forward between there and there, which invites you to move around the whole surface a little bit more. It's less of a flow chart diagram because, yeah, it's a modulation monster. let's face it, almost all of this on the bottom is to do with modulation, and you can get some pretty incredible sounds out of it. It's a great synth. It's been used by funk acts, it's been used by all kinds of people, and it's been used by Gary Newman and John Fox and all those people, and that's the kind of region I obviously lean towards. I haven't got a funky bone in my body, but yeah, it's this kind of thing. Yeah, I just love it. I'm going to hold this note until the end of the video. Listen. It's just doing that all by itself. Yeah, I mean, some people have said that the Mini Moog is a bit like a Les Paul, and that the Odyssey is more like a Strat, and maybe even more specifically, I think a Telecaster. I think it's got that rock thing going. This is going to cut through. You're not going to have any trouble hearing this on stage. All right, good night. Thanks for watching.